My first pet, well, I suppose we had goldfish in the budgie before then, but... And I was 4 years old when our first dog arrived. My grandmother brought a little terrier puppy, and we called her Tina. Not my grandmother, the dog. And I grew up with Tina, and she was in a sense my best friend, I guess. My best non-human friend anyway. And my first experience of how animals have some kind of a sixth sense, it's not really that, they're just sensitive in general, they pick up vibes. And because my grandmother was the first member of the family that Tina had known, she always was pleased to see my grandmother. She had a great relationship with her. And one day, she acted very strangely, the dog. She hid underneath the chair and would only come out for my grandmother when my grandmother came to visit that day. And we all thought, this is bizarre, because she just didn't behave like that at all. And she'd sit underneath the chair and she'd whimper, come out for my grandmother, and then go back under the chair again. Then in the evening, my grandmother headed for home. She went to get the bus, and she was walking along the pavement, or the sidewalk, if you want to call it that. And it was dark, and the workmen had been doing some work, some repairs, digging, and they hadn't put a barrier around the hole, and they hadn't put any lights there to mark where they'd been working, and my grandmother fell down the hole and broke her arm. And after that, the weight seemed to lift off Tina, the dog, and Tina behaved normally again. And certainly from then, I've taken notice of what the animals around me, or the birds, or whatever, are kind of saying. Anyway, the next incident, I guess, was the next dog, Bonnie, who was a beautiful border collie cross. A friend of mine brought his brother along. Nothing unusual in that at all. But Bonnie liked everybody. I mean, she really adored people. She just jumped up and down at them. She wanted attention of them. But this guy came along, and she backed off, and she barked at him, and she hated him, actually. At one point I thought she was going to go for him, chase him out the house. And shortly afterwards he was arrested, because around the time that Bonnie had been really not liking him very much, he'd actually set fire to somewhere. He was a bit of an arsonist, and he got convicted for arson. And so there's something in his character that the dog picked up on, and the rest of us didn't know about it. There wasn't a smell of smoke in him or anything like that. But the dog knew. Very good judges of character. And what's made me start thinking about all this again is that the other day, nothing's actually happened this time, but it's still in my mind. The cat wanted nothing to do with Billy. Billy hadn't done anything. Billy has a slight cat allergy, but it doesn't really affect him that much unless there's like 2 or 3 cats around. And there's never been a problem between this cat and Billy. But Billy went to give her some treats, and the cat backed off and growled a lot and looked at me, kind of pleaded for me to open the door so that she could get out and away from Billy. And I thought, what on earth is that about? And Billy was saying, well, what have I done? He hadn't done anything. But that day he was going off to stay with his aunt for a few days. And I was sitting there all day thinking, I hope he's okay. I hope nothing happens in the journey. And I sent him a text when I figured he would have got there, and I said, did you get there okay? Blah, blah. And he didn't send a text back, and I was thinking, this is unusual. And then I remembered that he'd said something about not having any credits for his phone. So I thought, okay. So in the end I phoned normally and didn't do the text message thing. I hate doing texts anyway, it takes ages for me. I press this thing so many times. So I just called and he was fine. And he's still fine, and nothing has happened. Or maybe it has and I don't know about it, but he basically tells me everything that's going on. And doesn't tell everything to his mother. It must be a male bonding thing or something. But anyway, so far so good. And the cat's been fine since. So what that was about, I have no idea. In fact, it was my brother who bought some parakeets for himself, red rump parakeets, and he bought a pair, and the male died within about 6 months. Nothing to do with neglect or anything, we just don't know how old it was when it arrived. And they live about 6 or 7 years on average. So the female was left on her own, and my brother sort of lost interest. They were living outside, out of sight, out of mind, and it was the thick of winter. I went along, and everything was frozen up. And out of just casual interest, I wandered down to see how the hen parakeet was doing. And anyway, the food dish was empty, and the water was frozen solid, and she was sat looking very, very unhappy, trying to suckle off an icicle hanging from the top of the aviary. So I went where I knew the food was, I filled the dish with sunflower seed, and I gave her fresh water. And I said to my brother about how I'd found the bird, and he wasn't terribly concerned. So I decided, okay, I'll take her off your hands. And so I had suddenly a hen parakeet to look after. So I left it a while, and then I bought another male, and they took to each other, love at first sight, brilliant. They had several chicks, and they were a very happy family, great. And then after about 6 years he died, and she was absolutely distraught. You know, she would sort of pine and well, I suppose she was calling or crying or shouting or something all day long. And so I went down and I stood in the aviary with her for about an hour, and I talked to her. And it might sound stupid, standing there talking to a bird, but really, I don't think she could understand a word I was saying, but I think she appreciated the fact that I was there, talking to her, and the tone of voice and everything, I hope, gave some kind of support. Anyway, she quietened down after that, and then I left it a little while longer and I got her another mate, and this mate outlived her. She died when she was about, well, she was at least 13. It was 13 years since my brother had first got her, and she may have been a year and a half or more. They usually sell them about 18 months. So she lived well beyond the age of the normal lifespan of a parakeet, or this particular breed of parakeet. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I'm going to have my coffee now and my biscuits, so I'll catch you all later. Have a great weekend, or week, or whenever you watch this video.